Okay, we're getting ready to get started. Just as a reminder, the webinar will be recorded and you will get an email within the next 24 hours with the link to the recording. So let us welcome Richard Ding. Richard is part of our product team focused on BigInsights, and his main area of expertise is security. So, Richard, you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. And so my name is Richard Ding. I'm with IBM BigInsights Group. So today's our talk, the topic is how do you secure a BigInsights, or in general, how do you secure a Hadoop cluster? So we talk about the basic concepts and best practices we learned from our deployment in our customer sites. So what is the enterprise big data security? So that's actually a very important topic, and especially right now, I mean, we always hear the news that there's some kind of security break, or in like recently some hackers just get hold of some Hadoop cluster and ask for ransom, right? So, and threatens to delete the data unless the ransom money get paid. And that happened. And also you can see that happened if you have any Hadoop deployment, your port is exposed, you can see your port get constantly scanned by the outside the hackers or whatever group, and they try to find any security holes in your cluster. So this is a very important topic, and especially in the enterprise setting, people are say how to secure a Hadoop cluster, and before this seems a very daunting task to do that, but it's a task you must perform. So I hope that I can give some basic concepts and best practice today, so that we have a basic idea how to do some basic stuff, so that we have a basic security in place before your cluster get into production. So you can see on the screen that the enterprise big data security, and they have 5 aspects, right? So first is authentication. So any user of the cluster must prove, who is what they claim to be, right? So that's important. So you don't want unauthorized user, unauthenticated user to access your cluster or any data inside the cluster. The second one is the authorization, that basically after you authenticate, what can you do, right? And this is particularly important is for the multi-tenancy in the enterprise data center or cluster, that for the multi-tenancy, you have multiple different users from different groups, right? What they can do. You have to have the policies in place. The third one is the auditing, so we know who you are, what can you do, and we need to know what you did, right? That's part of auditing, right? So we can know who accessed the system, and whether it's authorized access or not authorized access. And the first area is called encryption, right? So basically, we have 2 topics here. We talk about integrity and confidentiality. So integrity means the data, either in transit or at rest, is not compromised. So nobody can say accept and intercept your data and modify that and send you inject their own data into your data stream. So we need to prevent that. So that's called integrity. And the other one is the confidentiality. So even if some hacker or somebody get hold of your data, either intercept that in transit or at rest on your file system. Say somebody hacked into your cluster. So we have to ensure that they cannot read your data, right? So that's the part of encryption and the confidentiality. And finally, for any enterprise big data security, you have to pay attention to operation security. That is, your data must be available all the time, right? So that means that to prevent the denial of service attack. And also, you have to set up we always say that the security is about the people, policy, and so your system is only as strong as your weakest link, right? So usually you have policy, for example, it recommend you have a periodic and penetration testing, right, to verify that your system is not compromised or identified any security holes. Okay, that said, let's go. So authentication, when I talk about authentication, we mean that the end user need to be authenticated against an authentication system, right? So in the Hadoop environment, so basically we have, these are three of them here. One is a Kerberos, the other one is a PAM, and the third one is LDAP. These are the authentication systems and often used, mainly used by the big data Hadoop clusters. So for the Kerberos authentication, and we just leave some basic concepts. So this is the Kerberos authentication, and this is a network authentication protocol, and developed at MIT, and it's based on the symmetric key cryptography, right? So it's different from the public key and the encryption. So this mainly is used by the Hadoop clusters. So when you hear people talk about secure Hadoop cluster, that means a Hadoop cluster with Kerberos authentication. The third one is that Kerberos authentication is what do we call it? Trusted third-party authentication model. So they have basically they have a three-party involved. First one is the KDC. We call it the Key Distribution Center. That is a trusted third party. And we have a client and a server, and the client will talk to the server to get whatever resource they need through the KDC, through the third-party authentication service. So the basic concept is here is that we have given a list of basic concepts, and so basically the KDC is just a database of the user and password. The user in the Kerberos environment is called principals, right? And so basically this is a database which contains username and password. So it has two components. One is the authentication server, and the other one is we call ticket granting server, or TGS. So the principal is the username used in the Kerberos environment. And so basically, there's two types of principals. One is the service principal. Usually we call it SPN. There's a service principal name, and end user, the UPN. Right. So we have two kinds of users. The third concept you often hear is a key tag. So key tag is just a file which contains the principal and the encrypted password. And this used basically mostly by the services which you don't need to provide a password when you log in. So it's for the non-interactive services. The final concept is called ticket. There are two kinds of ticket. One is a ticket granting ticket and issued by the authentication server. The second is the service ticket. Okay. So with this concept, we'll see how the Kerberos works. So this is so Kerberos first was the user. So we talked in the previous slides that the KDC had two components. One is authentication service. The other one is a ticket granting service. So the first step is when the user try to get access to a network resource, a service, the first thing you do is to log into the authentication service and ask for a ticket granting ticket. So one of the beauty of Kerberos authentication of Kerberos protocol is that your password is never unwired. It never passed from the client to server and from the client to the KDC. Your password is never passed through in any form, either in plain text or in encryption form. So that this feature is a very nice feature because it prevents the so-called man-in-the-middle attack. So nobody can intercept your password in any form, either in the encrypted form or non-encrypted form. Okay, so you send it, and then the KDC is sent back your ticket granting ticket encrypted with your password, right? Because your password is inside KDC. And as long as you have your password on your machine or in your memory, in your machine's memory, you can decrypt the TGT. And so if you can decrypt that, that means that you are the user who you claim to be. So that means you authenticate against and KDC, a Kerberos server. So now if you want to get to access a service, you use your TGT to ask for a service ticket. The reason you TGT is that this is a temporary ticket because TGT has an expiration date. That basically by default is 24 hours. So that this just basically when you authenticate against the Kerberos KDC, they just gave you a temporary ticket granting ticket. This provided that you have a permanent ticket, and then this ticket get compromised, somebody stolen the ticket, they can use it later. So they can only use in a very short window. So that's the feature that is implemented by the Kerberos protocol. So you use instead of using your own principal and the password, you use the ticket granting ticket to ask for a service ticket. And then you get a service ticket from the KDC, and you present your service ticket to the services that you want to access to. And after service has verified your service ticket, and then they grant your access. So that's a basic how the Kerberos works. So the next topic over here is how the Kerberos are deployed in the enterprises. So first, we have three types of KDCs. One is the MIT KDC, and the other one is the Microsoft Active Directory. So right now, the Microsoft Active Directory is used by many enterprise customers. And the reason is Microsoft, I think in the early 2000, that incorporate the Kerberos into their directory service. So basically, as we said, Kerberos is Kerberos service is backed by a database of user and the password, and that database can be an LDAP server. So what is Microsoft did at that time is integrate that with the LDAP server, so that they have an integrated service, so-called integrated identity service. The third type is called free IPA, which is the Red Hat counterpart of Active Directory. So it's basically also is an integrated identity management service, which include Kerberos and LDAP, and also include a certificate authority. So how the customer or the enterprise deploy the Kerberos servers? There's also have three kinds of deployment. One is called use the local KDC, either use the Active Directory or MIT KDC or free IPA. So basically, just set up a local KDC just for your cluster. For the bigger enterprise, another popular deployment topology is to use a local KDC with enterprise Active Directory. So that way you don't have to replicate all your Active Directory users into your local KDC. So basically use a one-way cross-RAM trust, so that when the end user log in, instead of check with the local KDC, a local KDC will just forward that to the enterprise Active Directory, and to verify that to the authenticated user. And so this is the popular deployment by the bigger enterprise, because they save a lot of trouble, because Active Directory, enterprise Active Directory may change quite often, and each time you change, you have to replicate that change to your local KDC, which is is not very good. The last one is not recommended. It's basically you use a central enterprise Active Directory as your KDC, and because sometimes you deploy different clusters, your cluster can up and down, and they have new clusters, which requires you to ask your IT department to add all these new entries into the enterprise Active Directory, which is usually not recommended. Okay, so how well do we Kerberize our cluster or enable the secure cluster? Before, it's very difficult and a lot of work, because you need to configure each component and need to generate all the key tabs and put into the right place, and also need to configure component by components to enable the Kerberos. But the good news is that Ambari has this feature called automated Kerberization. So right now, it basically make that Kerberization of your cluster very simple. So you can see on this slide, you just go to the Ambari UI, go to admin, and click on Kerberos. So when you inside the Kerberos page, and there's a button called Enable Kerberos, and you just click on the Enable Kerberos button, and just follow. There's a Kerberos Wizard, and then just follow the wizard. For example, the first page will give you this information, And the wizard were released for this picture is taken from the BigInsights 4.3, which is, you can see that it supports 4 types of KDCs: MIT, Active Directory, and your own the Kerberos server, other Kerberos server, and the IPA, free IPAs. And each one will have their own prerequisites, right? So you just follow that. So from this without order, you can see that, and the setting of the KDC is outside the Ambari. So you need to first set up, configure the KDCs, and then you can use a wizard. And so for each one you select, they have different the prerequisites, and you need to see, for you in this case, you have to see, okay, you need to have the KDC administrative credentials, right? But this is very easy, so you just click next, and whatever information you need, you just fill in, and after that, they will deploy all the Kerberos credentials and basically Kerberize your cluster. And for the details, you can see that in the IBM Knowledge Center, we have a detailed information on how to set up and integrate MIT KDC and Active Directories. So on the bottom, you can see also we have the blogs and give an overview and more detailed information on how to set up and run the Kerberos Wizard. So the good news is, after that, all of the services you deployed inside a Hadoop cluster with the Ambari, all these services will be Kerberized. Right? So you don't have to do anything. Like before this, you have to configure each component. Right now, it's all automatic. Okay, so the other one is now the other you will hear a lot is called SPNEGO, and this is just basically the Kerberos for HTTP protocol, right? This is developed at IBM because so how do you authenticate with HTTP protocol, right? So how do you send all these your ticket information? So they modified HTTP protocol, and it's called SPNEGO protocol. So basically, the user, you first you send a normal URL request to a web server. So basically, a GET HTTP request with a URL, and for the web server which supports SPNEGO protocol, they will reply with a 4.1 access denied error code, and with authentication negotiate response header. And when the client gets this authentication negotiate response header and 4.1 error code, then the client will go ahead to the client will realize that, okay, the server asked for the Kerberos authentication. So then the client goes to the KDC and get the ticket for the web server, and wrap that ticket into a so-called SPNEGO token, right? It's basically a SPNEGO token, and it basically is kind of like a text message, and then the client resend the same request with a header, negotiate header with this SPNEGO token to the HTTP to the web server, and then the web server will accept this and decode this SPNEGO token and authenticate the user, because the SPNEGO token contains a Kerberos ticket, and the authenticated user, and then just a response with the normal response to the request URL. Again, for the detail, you can see the blogs in our IBM developer site. Also, final topic on the Kerberos is when you enable the Kerberos, the server components, the REST endpoints, REST API, for example, like Web HDFS, HBase, or Solar, or for example, all the Uzi, also enable the SPNEGO authentication are enabled, so that it requires SPNEGO authentication. And in this case, if you want to use some features on Ambari web UI, for example, the Ambari views, we need to call these REST APIs to get the data. Then the Ambari server itself need to have a Kerberos principle to go through this SPNEGO and the negotiation protocol. And that one is not automatically set up by the automated Kerberization that we talked before. So you need to manually configure. And if you go to that, and this step also documented, so you can get details from the link below. Okay, so that's the part where I want to mention, because this is not part of automated Kerberization. Okay. So how about another popular authentication mechanism is PAM authentication, and it stands for the pluggable authentication module. So the advantage of the PAM is that it's basically we know that in the software design we have this separation of concern principle, that in this case we separate how the authentication is implemented and from the service authentication feature, right? And in addition to that, sometimes because it's necessary for the customers, because a lot of times, many times the LDAP authentication support in our components are not very sophisticated. So for example, most times it does not support multiple domain or multiple LDAP server. Say you have an Active Directory, also you have some open LDAP or some other LDAP server. Also, sometimes your LDAP server, you have to support you support nested groups or multiple search bases. All these are not completely supported by the components, just use LDAP, default LDAP authentication. The third advantage is a lot of enterprise customers, they already have the PAM support in their enterprise IT infrastructure. So that makes it very easy to integrate. Basically, just point your PAM to the enterprise IT PAM infrastructure, and then you're ready to go. Right? You don't have to configure the LDAP one by one. So this becomes very popular in many enterprise customers. And the good news also is in BigInsights, all the gateway services. So with so-called gateway services, you can think about like the Knox, Hive, Hive Server 2, Ranger, Ambari, BigSQL server. All these are we call the gateway services, right? So basically, the user can access the cluster through all these gateway services. And all these gateway services right now, and they support PAM authentication, right? The newest one is I put it like a BigInsights 4.3 because the Ambari is added in BigInsights 4.3. So with Ambari support, and all gateway services now support PAM authentication. Yeah. So for the LDAP authentication, we have so Open LDAP with Open LDAP Active Directory, Free IPA, or IBM Tripoli, right? But as I said, for this you have to configure that one by one, and for all the gateway service components. Okay, so the next talk, we just talked about authentication. So now the user is authenticated against the system either through the Kerberos or through the PAM or LDAP authentication. So now the next step is what can you do, right, in that authorization part. So the Hadoop authorization is based on the username, right? So either you through the Kerberos or LDAP or the PAM, what you get into the system is a username, right? And username and associated group. The group is basically the username, and you can get a group from the LDAP or from the system, right? The user group. So that's the key point we want to mention here, because all the Hadoop authentication is based on the username, right? So who you are and which group you belong to. And right now, more become very popular is so-called role-based access control, right? So this basically is based on the model of relational database. In a relational database, you have this a role-based access control, and so each component and many components now starting to implement this role-based access control. Even HDFS has this so-called role-based access control. Okay. So the third one is the one right now shipped with BigInsights is the component called Apache Winter. So Apache Winter is basically provide a centralized authorization system for Hadoop, and that a lot of enterprise customer and IT department like this feature, because instead of configure and each individual component, and they have each one has its own say command line, different command, different syntax. Now you have a centralized access authorization management system, right? So in BigInsights 4.3, the following 7 services are supported. That is HDFS, YARN, Hive, HBase, Knox, Kafka, Solr, and BigSQL. Right? So it's basically very flexible, and in this also they support a flexible and enhanced echo models. And so basically it's a pluggable architecture so that you can add new services, right? So how does the Ranger authorization work? So basically Ranger itself, so here the green part, the green box are the Rangers. The Ranger has this here in this picture only show 2 components. One is the Ranger admin, which basically is a web server, right, which you can use to configure your policies. And the other one is so-called Ranger plugin. So each service will have a Ranger plugin. When your plugin will live in the Hadoop in the corresponding service process inside the service process. So part of the service process. So first, you can use the Ranger admin UI to set your policies for, before previously mentioned the 7 supported services. And this after you save the policy, and this policy will be refreshed into the Winter plugin to its corresponding service. And when the user try to access the Hadoop resource, and the Hadoop resource will delegate authorization to the Ranger plugin, right? And the Ranger plugin will basically, every call come in and it will be intercepted and delegated to a Ranger plugin running inside the process. And then they will either deny or allow your service, allow you to access a resource. And finally, any access, any deny or allowed access will be logged, and the so-called audit log. So in the 4.3, and the Ranger audit log thing, they support HDFS and also Solar. Now we'll talk more about in a minute. So here is just a show a Ranger UI, and here you have supported services plugin. You have 7 here, and HDFS and Yarn, and yeah. So as I said, here the only thing we're not missing is the BigSQL, and BigSQL is a part of the value add to the BigInsights. So if you install the BigSQL, and there's another plugin will show up here. So you can use here, for example, you can click any the plus sign to add new policies of authorization policy. Right? For example, here is an example of HDFS authorization policy. Right. So this is, for example, the result path is the Ranger audit Knox on the HDFS, right? And so you say which group and which user can access, and these the files under this path, HDFS path, and what kind of permission you can have, right? And you can define more policies and for different components, right? So you can define for Hive, for example, HBase. Okay, so that's the basic Ranger. Okay, so we talk about authentication, authorization, and the next topic is the encryption, right? So we need to have confidentiality and so encrypt the data. So basically, this have two sides. One is we need to encrypt the data in transit, and also we need to encrypt the data at rest. So for the data for the Hadoop RPCs, because Hadoop RPC the authentication is based on the SASL protocol, right? So the SASL protocol, in addition to the authentication, SASL protocol also support, and we talked before, integrity and confidentiality, right? So when you configure the SASL protocol or Hadoop RPC protocol of RPC properties, you can set different protection mode. By default, it's set to, if you set use the authentication, which is the Kerberos authentication, or you can set to integrity, which will include, if you set that mode to integrity, that will include authentication, right? And if you set the RPC protection mode to privacy, then all three will include it, right? Not only is RPC support authentication, but also support encryption and integrity. Integrity basically means you will have message digest and compute a checksum so that make sure your message is not compromised during the transit. So this is one way to secure the Hadoop RPC is use use a different SASL mode, or in the Hadoop configuration you just use RPC and configuration property. So the other one is to translate we use the PRS and SSL. So this probably everybody familiar with. This is based on the public key cryptography, and yeah. So right now it is recommended to use the PRS version 1.1 and above, and I use advanced encryption standard, and so that you can take advantage of the Intel hardware acceleration. So for the certificate, and when you will see when you read the documentation, there are three kinds of certificate. One is self-signed certificate, which is only recommended for the test or the development clusters. The other one is so authority signed, which is either the internal authority. For example, you can in IBM you can submit your certificate and sign by the IBM internal certificate authority, or you can send it to the public third party like VeriSign or others. Right. So each the certificate will include your public key, the server public key, and who issued that, and the issuer will sign that, sign that certificate. Right. So that's the certificate, and can be verified. So, and when you talk about the certificate, and when you're debugging or setting up the SSL or PRS, and there's two words you will hear a lot. One is the key store, and the other one is trust store. The key store is basically used by the server to authenticate themselves, which will contain the private key and the certificate, which contains public key and the signature. Okay, so when you talk to the server, when the people talk to the server, and the server will present the certificate to you. And for the client will use a so-called trust store, and which either contains the certificate of trust server or of other CA trusted to identify your server, right? So that you can have a chain of the certificate authority, and so that it can verify the signature is come from a trusted authority. But there's no private key. So basically, the trust store is used by the client to verify the certificate presented to him by the server. Right. And this is general concept of the key store and the trust store. The other one is called important is the Java key store and trust store, because many services, Hadoop services are mostly implemented in Java, and in Java there are some default trust stores. So, for example, the default trust store is come with the Java installation, which contains some very high level and certificate. Then, right, and then in the Java case, you can set up the trust store and key store through the system properties. The other important notion, and people will see a lot, is the key tools and open SSL. There's the questions. So basically, what a key tool is a Java command line utility, that you can use to generate the keys and certificates in Java key store format. And the other one you can use is OpenSSL. This again is also a SSL command line utility, right? And they have a different. They can generate a certificate in the different format, but this format can be converted to each other, right? And for more detail, you can read the other blogs and other documentation. Yeah, but sometimes people do have questions. So which one should I use? Should I use a key tool or should I use the OpenSSL? And the general answer is you can use either one, but in most times for the Java components, the key tools are used more often. Right. So right now, what we are working on and the community are working on is how to automate through the Ambari, right? Automate this process. So right now, the setting up the SSL connections is a manual process, right? Although it's well documented, but it's still a manual process. And hopefully in the near future, that one can, just like a Kerberos, can be automated. Okay, so that's for the data in transit. So how about the data at rest? So this one, to deal with that issue, basically data at rest means the data in the distributed file system, Hadoop distributed file system. And in this case, HDFS implemented and the so-called transparent encryption. So these are basic features when you talk about transparent encryption. And so basically each time and you want to enable the transparent encryption, first thing you need to do is to set up an encryption zone and create an encryption zone key that basically associated directly with this encryption key, right? So after you set an encryption key and then the transparent encryption use the data encryption key to encrypt the data. So the good news is that the data encryption key is never handled directly by HDFS. So HDFS will not know your either the data encryption key or the encryption zone key, right? All these keys are managed and stored by the key management server, so-called KMS. So only the encrypted data encryption key is stored on the name node, so as part of the file metadata. So that's an important concept. So even if the hacker or to get hold of a name node or data node, the only thing they have is you can get is encrypted key, right? Not the key itself. The key itself is stored and protected by the key management server. Right? Of course, yeah, if the key management server itself is compromised, then yeah, you have a problem. So there's a basic concept is you need to know and remember is the encryption zone key and the data encryption key and encrypted data encryption key and key management server. And with the LP and the BigInsights, the latest version and 4.3, we shipped with the Ranger key management server, and which the keys are stored in the database, backed so by the Ranger key management server, and so that that particular database need to be protected carefully so that nobody can access these unencrypted keys. So this means that it's called a transparent encryption because for the end user, after you set up the encryption zone and the encryption zone key, you access, read, and write the data to the HDFS. It's just a normal operation, right? It's transparent to the end user. All the encryption are transparent to the end user. So here's the example, right? So for the normal user, first you need to create your encryption zone key and create a encryption zone. And there's a command line utility to do that. And then after you set up the encryption zone and make sure to have the correct user access to that zone. And for the normal user, you just do exactly what they have done before with the normal operation. Everything is transparent to the end user. Okay, finally, and for the local disk, and sometimes you can use so-called LUK encryption to encrypt local disk. And so the next topic is the auditing. I can actually go a little bit quicker. So here, again, the Ranger, Apache Ranger provide this centralized auditing, right? The audit file can be stored in HDFS, and also is the audit integrated with Solar service for you can forward easy search and filtering. So for example, and here are some UI you can see, and this one also, I said people like this feature because they provide you a centralized auditing service. So you can, from a single UI, you can get all the information for all the components that support the Ranger plugins. So for example, this page will show you the access screen. So you get all the access information, access auditing records. And this page is basically just the admin. So who created a policy and when the policy is updated, created. This is the admin auditing and login auditing. And the first one is plugin auditing, right? So basically from the single place and single UI, you can get the full picture of who access and what policy get set up and for your cluster. That's a good thing. Okay, so finally, there's as we talk about, you need to have operational security. It's very important how to provide intrusion and provide the replay attack, and also important is documentation and training. So so there's some ways, for example, intrusion, and so how to prevent and to do this denial of service attack, right? So there's a couple of tools you can use, Linux tools you can use to prevent attacks. Right? But the caveat here is all these tools that do not prevent distributed and denial of service attack. So that's so we saw in the news that there's a denial of service attack. I think a couple months ago or last that like bugs or a lot of services are taken down because they have distributed a denial of service from all the appliances, right, to send out the denial service. It's very hard to prevent this distributed denial service attack. Okay, so so also you need to do the maintenance, and there's some recommendations, and you need to periodically audit your control. Go to your audit log. Periodically, you need to change the password and certificate, right? And you need to check your update your threat model and run web scan and penetration tests to make sure that no new holes or no issues and pop up because your component update or configuration changes. Okay, so I think that's what's all here is, again, is the document of blogs and knowledge center. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so that's basically the topic. Again, the security is very important, especially for the enterprise. You have to pay attention, although this seems very mundane, and but is until you get some security issue, until somebody hold all your data and send you a ransom note to say, if you do not give me money, I will delete all your data, and then then you realize how important that security is. Okay, so I'm done. Any questions?
We don't have any questions right now. Do we have any new questions from the audience?
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for joining the talk. And if you have any feedback, please send to me and or to the organizers.
Thank you so much. And yes, you will receive an email with a link to the recording of the session, and we'll make the slides available. Thank you so much for joining us.